Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Free Advice Friday. I'm Keri Barnum for New Shelves Books, and today I'm delighted to have special guest Alan Gibson, who is an author. He is one of the lead people who is organizing Manuscript to Marketplace Conference. And Alan was in marketing and PR for years as well. So I always love having Alan on because he's got, so many great insights and ideas into book marketing and to marketing in general. We were talking about, I believe it was this morning, just about the psychology of marketing and how it's not just is something pretty. Is it getting seen, but is it getting seen by the right people? And one of the things I would ask you, Alan, is how do you know when you're marketing, how do you know if you're reaching the right audience? Not just like, are you just getting exposure, but how do you know if you're reaching the right audience?
Well, that's a really good question because this morning over breakfast, we have a house full here of presenters and attendees and committee people staying. But over breakfast, we were talking, and you mentioned that you'd started marketing when you were like 15 with your parents' businesses. And I started, 40, 50 years ago too. And what's interesting is back then, you had no idea if you were reaching the right people. You would place an ad in a newspaper or a magazine, and you would hope that somewhere along the line, as they're flipping through the magazine, that they would land on your page. And if they did, they would stay long enough to read the headline. And then if they would, and it was just a kind of a pig and a poke. Same with television. We would buy radio and TV commercials and hope that somebody saw our commercial. But nowadays, we have metrics. We can track exactly how many people have seen our ads and how long they've been looking at them and how long they've read our copy. And, I buy still a lot of digital products in media and where I play a lot of videos. And now we measure exactly how long they've watched the video and how, your completion rate on that is really important metrics.
Right. Or if they're clicking over to your sales page, because sometimes your completion rate on a video can be very short, but they're just like, all right, just show me the product. And that's not a bad thing. So there's something for there as well.
But what's interesting is that the mediums have changed and, it's completely different from when we both were doing it a long time ago, but the principles are the same. Mm-hmm. And, everybody wants to get really creative and everything, but if you absolutely have your core principles, right, it doesn't matter what medium you're using, you just have to kind of adjust. I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now, but, I don't know, it's fun.
And do you think with the changes in marketing, I know some people or some authors still have this big dream of being on local TV, of being on the radio. Do you think those are still like great opportunities, or do you think that things like online advertising are just as good or even better in some ways?
In general or for books?
For books.
I have to say that I still have some large clients. And what I mean by large clients is that they spend a lot of money in media. And 90% of it now is digital.
Wow.
In one form or another, whether it's a streaming thing or if it's ads on a portal or pop-up ads or whatever, video. And I honestly haven't bought much television and radio anymore. I'm not convinced of the accuracy in targeting audiences. I mean, I used to buy tons of television. I still buy a fair amount, but there's so many choices. And it used to be, 3 networks or 4 networks and everybody watched the same stuff, but now it's just so scattered around. It's very, very difficult to buy without a huge budget where you can cover
lots of ground. Well, and something that I've seen for sure is now that people are streaming, it might make sense if you've got a really big budget to buy ads in streaming services. But most of the time, people aren't necessarily watching local TV or the news.
Certainly, young people aren't.
No.
I mean, but I would also say that there are markets, mostly rural markets, where the local TV station is a big deal. Yeah. And sometimes there's a radio station that's very popular, and those could be good for books.
Do you think it would be better, or is it just as good to do a paid ad in those markets, or is it better if you're a local author to just try for an interview or something like that? Do you think there's a difference of if I live in Virginia and I'm going to a rural market and I am, doing ads there compared to if I'm a local author doing an interview, do you think we'll get different responses?
Well, of course, I would recommend you do both. But,
Really?
yeah, well, you want to set the stage, and when the interview comes, you want to say, "Oh, I remember that person. I saw an ad or something." But of course, an interview is always great if it's a program people listen to or watch.
Well, this is what's astounding to me is that when we look at the numbers of radio, when we look at the numbers of news, because that's most of the time when you're on TV, especially if it's smaller TV interviews, it's the news. And when we look at the news, it's actually astounding the new data coming out that people don't watch the news. They mostly get the news from
From their phones.
online, from their phones. And so if you look at the numbers, they've shrunk drastically of how people used to turn on the 6 o'clock news. And now they're just ingesting news all day on their phone. So it's very different. And if there's no one watching it or a very small audience watching it, doesn't matter how cool it looks, or I was on TV, unless you're able to get that clip and use it on your website or
Right.
somewhere else, it doesn't do you much
Right, and
good.
there's value in that, of course. But then again, if you have an interview and you're interviewing a romance writer, and 90% of the listeners aren't interested in romance, you've lost them right away. So it's a gamble. It's a big gamble.
Yeah, it is much harder to target. And Beth is asking, you mentioned kind of the principles in marketing. So what are like your top couple of principles for marketing generally, but a book specifically?
Well, you got to know who your reader is, and have to know where the reader lives, where they get their media. And if it's TikTok, it's TikTok. We talked about that last night.
We did. We were talking about the different age groups in TikTok and also how sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. But if you're marketing a cozy mystery on TikTok, it's not really the age demographic for those people on TikTok. So it's going to be much more difficult than those in romance or fantasy, something like that.
And it really is very easy these days to target exactly the age demo that you're looking for. And it's magical, really, the way you can do it. So, and I have to say, most authors probably don't have the budget to buy TV or radio. In fact,
I want to talk about this.
Yeah,
Like,
you want to?
look at me. I'm like,
All right.
so I have often talked about to market a book, you often need time, money, or both. And when people think about, oh, I want to be on radio, I want to be in TV, we think of interviews because that's just what we think of. But it's harder to get interviews than you might think because there's only so much time. Whereas paid advertising, when you're paying to get in front of an audience, is easier to do. But people do not understand, I don't think, the vast budget that can take.
Oh, yeah.
So what insights can you give us? Like if we were going to run a radio campaign, if it was like a local area, do you have any insights to a general range that might cost?
Well, it depends on the market. I mean, some of these rural markets, the small markets are very inexpensive, but you're still talking about $25 a spot, maybe, or you might even be able to get it for less. But even if it's $100 a spot, you still have to buy a lot of spots. It's always been a frequency game on radio and TV, and you've got to. When I started, I think you had to see an ad 4.5 times in order for you to start remembering what it is. Nowadays, it's much higher.
Over 21.
It's over 21 times. So that's a lot of ads you have to buy. So unless you're really flush and you want to blanket your market, it's to me at the bottom end of what you want to do.
Well, and it's just not guaranteed either. I mean, how many times I drove here yesterday and on my drive, a commercial comes on, next channel, next channel.
Right.
So we are conditioned now. We used to all watch. Actually, my kids recently were watching TV and an ad came on and they're like, this is so cool because they've grown up on streaming services and movies. They don't really see ads. So to them, it was kind of novel. But to those of us who had ads and then we've moved on to ad-free options, we really are like annoyed with them. We don't want to listen. And so I think sometimes that's a risk that you don't realize you're taking is even if you do pay for a spot, you have to have a lot of spots to hopefully grab your audience and to have them hear you again and again. But on top of that, we are conditioned to skip over advertising. It's actually why on TV, when you're watching TV or different things like that, and an ad comes on, it gets louder.
Right.
That's done on purpose because they assume you might leave the room or stop paying attention. And
Right.
it's to
And
get
it ends
your
up really kind of being aggrating
You-
for most
you-
people, right?
Yeah.
Well, but and when I bought radio, I did a lot of radio commercials for about 10 years, and radio was huge when I was doing that. So it was a great thing to buy. But there was this philosophy that if you bought a talk radio station,
Mhm.
an ad that had a lot of narration in it would get lost. But if you ran that ad on an all music station, then all of a sudden it's a break. You're not listening to music, you're listening to a voice. And so you actually kind of perk up, and you may not want to listen to it. You
That makes
turn it up, and
sense.
at least it attracts you. So
Yeah. And I think that's great. Now, in comparison, you said in some of these less expensive markets, it's $25 per spot.
or something.
I mean, just as an example,
Right.
in comparison, on Facebook ads, you can target an exact age range, interest, and you can do it for $2 a day. And you know who you're reaching. You can have metrics with your Amazon attribution links to know if they're going to buy on Amazon. So then you can actually analyze data and it's going further. So while I think sometimes things like radio and TV do have a broader reach, they don't necessarily have a better reach because it is so much more expensive and it's broad. Now, the caveat, in my opinion, is if you do get some of those assets later, if you're in an interview, because there are paid interviews as well. You can pay to play for some of these.
Sure.
And if you then have an interview that you can use and break up for social media, it's social credibility in that way. So I think that's a little bit different. But when we're looking at kind of the bang for your buck, because most of us are not millionaires. And if you are, call me. I'd love to work with you. But most authors are not. And so when we're talking about how many dollars should we put into things, even the difference between advertising, marketing, and PR, because PR is something that a lot of people think that they need. I'm not saying they don't need it, but they think that they need it. But PR is expensive.
PR is expensive, and it's also not a guarantee that you're going to reach the people that you want to reach. Now, paid advertising, you specifically say, I want to reach, 18-year-olds or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
And I want to reach them at night when they're at home, in their rooms doing something, whatever. But yeah, with PR, it's you hope that this event that you put on, or giving away flyers at some place, you hope that that's going to generate them.
Mhm. And tell me if you disagree. I'll elbow you if you disagree,
Okay.
but tell me if you disagree. I often say that PR is creating an awareness of something, whereas marketing and advertising are asking for a sale.
Yes,
Would
you're
you
absolutely-
agree that's
absolutely
correct?
right? Yeah. And getting back to just one other factor, I know that a lot of us authors, we write a couple books, we get them published, and we immediately want to be selling them, in all the big stores, and we want to be on TV, and sad to say, it really is kind of a dream for most of us. TV and radio, and even these interviews are better if you're a known author. Now, you might be a known local author, which works
That
fine.
works.
And we have a local station here in Shepherdstown. And I've been on it a few times, and some other people, and there's a group of people that, are avid listeners. And so that will make sense for us to be on, because, they know who we are. But if you're an unknown, it's really hard.
It is hard. Well, and also speaking of wanting your books in bookstores and things, the thing with getting your book in bookstores is that they're going to do some test copies. And if they're not bought, they're going to return those.
Right.
And if your name isn't known or you're not pairing that with some PR or some marketing, the chances of them buying are very low. But also there's this dream of, well, I need to get into bookstores to be a bestseller. But when we break down the numbers, Amazon accounts for over 70% of print book sales, which means less than 30% come from retail stores.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's not a great thing. I work in selling to bookstores, and it's something that has worked very well for some genres. But I also think it's no longer the golden ticket that it was, I mean, even 5 years ago, before COVID, before all the shutdowns, it was much more prevalent, but now we're so conditioned to shop online. I don't think it's the golden ticket that it once was.
Now, we do have a local bookstore, Four Seasons Books, and they're actually one of the sponsors of our writers conference. And our town has a lot of writers in it, and we have an enormous number of readers. So it's a very popular place. And there's a lot of cities around that have independent bookstores that are really popular. And those can be awesome outlets for selling. And when I go, my books are featured there time to time because people
You're known.
Yeah,
You're
so
known.
people will
That's
buy
the
them.
difference.
And and so are the other authors in town. So they can be really helpful. Now, to think that you're going to do well at Books a Million or one of those great
Without being known.
without being known. You know how many, how many shelves are there of books? And then you get to fiction or romance, and oh my gosh.
And well, it's the community aspects of being known in that. And I have to say that Four Seasons does such a great job. They have fun book clubs, and I see all their Facebook posts, but if you do not realize this, your local indie bookstore very likely has a book club. If you would eventually like your book featured in their book club, you should be attending their book club.
Right. You can't just all of a sudden show up and say, put my book in your book club.
No, or if you want them to feature your book in their store, things like that, you need to be a supporter of them. You can't just show up and be like, oh, by the way, I have an address here, stock my book.
And I know you've talked about this on your show many times, and the same goes for joining Facebook groups that are a book, maybe or in your genre or something. You can't just join one and then say, hey, buy my book. You've got to be a member, and you've got to contribute, and you've got to, be there for a while before they,
Exactly. It's trust. It's trust in marketing, and it's also relationship building, because it goes back to kind of that aspect of marketing to where you have connection to the psychology of things, is that we're more likely to support people that we feel some type of kinship to, that we feel, oh, well, I'm supporting a friend. I may not read the book, but I'm going to buy it.
Well, and also these days, people are constantly getting these interesting comments that you'll get on your phone or something like, hey, I saw that you're writing a book. It sounds really interesting. Can we talk about it? And most of these things end up being scams, because they just want to, they want you to engage with them. And then all of a sudden they're trying to sell you Bitcoin, or they're trying to do something else crazy that is, completely off. So you have to be really careful. And that's why these groups are kind of cautious about just accepting, new people.
To protect their members. Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is.
Right.
A question here. Facebook post boosting, sending new reader to new chapter on a website have proved to deliver excellent ROI. So that's great, Chuck. All of our advertising focuses on sending to author website where engagement and sales are steady daily. And that's fantastic. I think that there's something to be said for that as well. If you are selling direct, your traffic needs to go to your website. If your books are only on Amazon, it needs to go to Amazon. Right. It's not enough just to send to a website unless you then have a call to action. If you're sending to a sales page for your book on your author website, fantastic. If it is a email capture, a download, and you're sending them there, fantastic. But it's not just enough to send someone to a website. You kind of have to take them by the hand and say,
think about it. Whenever we are encouraged to buy something or something, the moment you have to go to another page or do one more click, it's like, forget it.
Right? Well, it's too much work. Or if I get there and it doesn't tell me what to do,
exactly,
you've got to hold people by the hand and not just say, click this link,
and then you scroll and try to find out what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
They're not going to work hard to buy your product. You have to make it easy for them to buy your product or to say yes. And that means clear call to actions, reducing clicks. We don't want them to have to click and click and click. This is why when doing an ad for a book series, we don't usually send to the series page, because then they're sending to the series page, then they have to find the right book, and then they have to click buy. Whereas if you send them directly to the first book in the series or the prequel, whatever it is, they click, they buy, they're done, and you've got that sale in hand. But studies actually show that the more clicks someone is required to do to get where you want them, the less conversion is.
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
makes a lot of sense.
And it seems to me that it needs to be even faster and faster and faster because we're less and less impatient. I mean, just with every passing year.
Oh, with everything, we are less patient. Speaking of kind of like the PR aspect of things, again, I know this is something you've worked in a long time. What if someone is going to invest in PR? And by the way, PR can be very expensive. PR regularly is between $3,000 and $30,000 per month.
Right.
For a minimum contract, usually of around 6 months. So PR can be very expensive, but if you are going to invest in PR, what are some tips for how people can make the most of their PR if they are working with a PR agency?
Well, first of all, I think you need to be absolutely clear what they're doing for you and what they're not doing for you, because I mean, PR, they're really good at PR for their own PR company. So, it's very easy to fall for stuff. And when they say they're going to get you into 200 bookstores, they may send an email to 200 bookstores, but that isn't really getting you in. So you've really got to focus on exactly what they're doing and spend as much time as you want to being very clear with them and having them explain, because you're paying a lot of money and it's got to work. That's my takeaway, because believe me, I've had other companies and we've hired PR firms and it's just been many times a disaster.
Right. Well, and they need to know, if you are hiring a PR company for books, you need to know they've worked in books. Have they
Exactly.
worked with your genre? Are there connections in your genre?
Right.
And it's also really important, and you kind of said this, oh, we'll get you into 200 bookstores. They mean they'll email 200 bookstores.
Right.
And there is a huge difference between we will pitch you for interviews and we'll get you on this really big interview. And it's not guaranteed, because even if you have connections, unless it's a pay to play opportunity, and there are some of those, it's not guaranteed. They could say, no, I'm sorry, bestie, but this topic is something I'm not touching right now, or it's not
Right.
trending, or we just covered this with someone else.
But the other thing is, when a library or a bookstore gets an email or a pitch from New Shelves Books, they perk up because they know who you are and that you're going to send them something, interesting or reputable.
Mhm.
So otherwise, if you're just, sending them in yourself, well, we all get millions of emails every day, so they just go by the wayside.
Oh, well, and also it's part of that is building the New Shelves brand, is
course.
we vet books before we send them in.
Sure.
They'll say, sorry, I can't send you into a bookstore. You
Right.
don't have a full trade discount. You're not on Gibson.
Right.
So there's that relationship and trust aspect
Yeah.
that keeps coming up for marketing. If you are going to do some type of PR, having experience yourself in PR, what's your kind of experience of doing PR for yourself versus paying someone to do it? Like, is there ever a time where it makes sense to save your money, but use some of those PR tactics to promote yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, for me, it's unusual because I have connections, and so I'm able to use those connections and get some PR for free, and get some interviews and get on radio and get on. I've been able to do all that kind of stuff, and it's just not the same for most people. It's just that I grew up in it, and I know a lot of people. So I'm not really sure that I can recommend it even. I mean, you've done some PR for me.
Yeah.
And it's worked well. And the lady before you, I forget her name. Amy. No, did some PR
Amy,
for
that
me too.
troublemaker.
Yeah, right. She did some PR for me that worked great too. But I don't know, did I answer the question or not?
Yeah, well, and I would say from my experience that there are things PR related that you can do for yourself, but they're going to take time. If you don't have a personal connection, there will be a lot of silence. Now, it doesn't cost you anything for the most part. So for those who are, you have some time, but you're short on cash, that can work very well. But I will also say I'm kind of seeing a trend that if you are reaching out to smaller platforms, the bigger the platform,
The more difficult.
the more difficult, but also it helps having a recognized name or company. But for smaller platforms, for podcasts and different things
I was
like
just going to
that.
bring up podcasts because there are so many. I mean, podcasts are so popular now. Everybody wants to do a podcast, right?
Of course.
And there are a lot of great ones. And but to get started in a podcast, you need content. And so I'm always approached by people that are saying, I'm starting a new podcast. Can I interview you? And I usually say yes. I mean, because why
Why
not?
not?
You know, even if she's got 10 people, if she's a book podcaster, maybe they'll be interested in my book. But yeah, that's the way to go. And there are ways to find them.
Well, there are ways to find them. They're easier to book. You can book them yourselves. I'm actually seeing more success when authors reach out directly to small and mid-level podcasts because it's quick for they're talking with the person that they're scheduling right away. It shows personal interest and that you're willing to talk to them.
Mhm.
And like you said, I don't think, unless there's something where you're like, I do not agree with something this person does or says,
Right.
obviously you want to distance yourself there. But I don't think there's such a thing as too small of an opportunity.
Mm-mm.
If you can make the time because they maybe only have 10 followers now. They might go viral on Big Book Talk next month and have, 1 million followers.
Or somebody may be following their podcast that has
Mhm.
another podcast of their own and
Yep.
they want to get you.
Like
So
steps.
it's little steps. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also, you pointed out earlier, whenever you're doing a thing like this or doing a
Mhm.
podcast with somebody, you can always take a clip from it and then promote that, use that for
Yes.
somewhere else. And yeah, those are invaluable.
Yes. Well, and that is one of the things that I often do if it's a smaller podcast. I say, I love this opportunity. Will I get the video of our podcast, not to rebroadcast, but may I use clips of it?
Mhm.
And usually I'll specify, may I use clips that are 60 seconds or less?
Right.
Because then I'm not trying to steal their thunder or their interview, and that helps. And I say, I'd love to use 60-second clips on my socials to promote this so I can guide them back to our interview,
Sure.
which helps them.
And
So
then everybody links everybody else and it's just
it's a win-win.
happy family. Yeah.
It's a win-win. Question here. Cheryl's saying, I go to gift stores. Should I design a sign or banner to where they would sell my books? So Cheryl, I think the question you're asking is if you're asking a store to carry your book, should you have a sign or banner that you can offer them? And usually a bookstore creates their own signage. Now, if you are going to a book signing at a store, it's usually acceptable to bring your own signage if you have certain things. I would certainly have a picture of that and ask them beforehand. But if you're trying to get them to stock your book, um, it's fine to have things available, but they are typically not going to use those signs because they've got their own marketing. And most likely, even if they are taking your book, they're either adding it to a table. What holiday is coming up? Easter's coming up. They probably have a table for books for Easter and they have their own signage. It wouldn't be specific to your book. Or to be honest, even if they're carrying your book, it's probably not being displayed front and center. It's probably going on a shelf, which is why having your title and your name on the spine is so important.
Right.
Because most of the books go to the bookstore. Most of the books are not outward facing. Most of the books they're lined up. And so if you don't have a really clear spine, people don't know what it is. They have no idea. And so they're not likely to pick it up if the title's not intriguing or if there's not a cool design or, different things like that. So I think that is why your spine, your cover is your best marketing.
Right.
But your spine in a store or a library setting is your most valuable real estate because that's what most people see.
And I know that, and I just fell into a bed of roses here. My romance fantasy series is a finalist in a big competition for best fiction series, and so I get these stickers, that say finalist. And so bookstores love to have stickers on the books because then somebody's going to look at it more than once. And actually, the bookstore here, Four Seasons, is eager to use these shelf talkers. So, there's a piece of paper that slips under the book and comes down and says finalist and then blah, 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 blah. So it draws people's attention. So those are the things that they would like you to give them if you've got it.
Yes. And it's more about, it's not assuming they'll use it, having the options of, by the way, I have stickers if you'd like those, or I have this, or I have that. It's being a good partner and offering them opportunity, but not necessarily assuming they'll use certain things. I think that's where we can step on toes.
Yeah, but when you're selling books in the bookstore, when they're letting you come in and sell and sign books, then you can have all kinds of stuff up because
Exactly.
you want,
You want attention.
right.
You wanna go, I am
I
here.
used to bring, this tall picture of me, on a big poster and stand it up behind me, and yeah, it's kind of fun. When else are you going to get to do that?
Well, now I just need you dressed up as one of your characters.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Actually, that works very well. A lot of people who have fantasy or sci-fi, they will cosplay their character.
Well, I'm not going to wear wings. I'm not going to wear fairy wings at book signing. I can tell you
Well,
that.
I might have some in my van.
All right. Well, if you insist. Right.
But that can be a kind of a fun way and a way to get attention because if nothing else, people are gonna be like, why are they dressed like that?
Right.
And
But you're right. I mean, it's some of our book fairs around here. You've got these great mystery writers, and I remember there was this one woman. She was older, and she had a whole series of some inspector, somebody or other, and she wore the hat, and the coat that was with the collar up and everything. She really played the part. Wow.
I just love that. Well, and so this works in bookstores, but this also works online. So many people are doing videos and things where
Sure.
they are dressing up as their characters. Maybe
Right.
they're even saying a line or convincing someone else to play a part in
Yeah,
it. And so
You
there,
can do anything now.
there are so many fun ways to market a book and here's the thing I have found, if you disagree, again, tell me. When it feels like marketing or advertising, you're going to get less attention than when it just is interesting and it markets at the end. You have to have a hook first. And too many people literally rush in going, this is an ad.
Mhm.
But when it's, oh, this is engaging, exciting, weird, even. And then you find out it's an ad at the end, that's where it's converting because they're watching longer. You're getting people's attention.
And when I was doing radio, that's exactly what I did. I worked for a retail clothing company. They were a client. And so lots of times I would go into where the blazer came from and, an HMS blazer. And somebody wanted their crew to look reputable when they came into port and they designed these jackets. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. And I would do that. And then, of course, we're ending up selling at the end. And in many cases, it's just like writing a book, or it's just like writing a pitch for somebody. You want to hook them, and then you want to tell them something, and at the end, you want to tell them what you just told them, and then you want to convince them to take action, whatever that action is, buy or click or
The call to
show up.
action is very important.
Yeah.
It's not just enough to and I see this with people who grow viral social media because they're doing funny videos or things, but they never have a call to action.
Right.
So we think you're hilarious. We think you're super cute, whatever it is. But there's no call to action. So
Right.
we don't know that you're actually trying to get us to buy a book. We're like,
Right.
oh, that was a great video.
Or they're shilling a product, and you're supposed to buy a subscription. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much to be learned from I hate to call them old models because they're not that old, but
well, they are.
well, in technology and so many things are shifting and there are things to be learned from those, but also realizing that what served when we were younger or in a demographic of how we heard about whatever is not how the next generation is. And this leads back to what you said in the beginning. You have to know your audience and where they're spending their time and where ads work because they are different. And if
Absolutely.
you don't know, this is one of the things I say for authors is number one, you should know your genre. Hopefully that's clear. Unless it's genre bending, in which case you should still figure that out. Then you should be doing research to find out who your audience is. And please, for the love, do not tell me, well, anyone could enjoy it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, anyone could, but they're not going to.
Right, they're not going to be found. They're not going to find you because Amazon isn't going to direct them to you.
Yes.
Because Amazon wants to know exactly what your book is about.
Exactly. Well, and the whole anyone idea. I mean, unless it's Christmas, no, anyone's not going to enjoy it. It's just true though. So or anyone could enjoy it, but who is the real target demographic? And when doing this, we typically want to hone in as close as possible. When we're talking about adult books, we can have a bigger age range. We can say 30 to 50. when we were talking about young adult, we need we need 14 to 18, because honestly, even 14 to 18, what kids are capable of reading, what they are, emotionally ready for, it's vastly different. I would actually say 14 to 16 and 16 to 18 for ads. If you're talking about children, do not tell me your book is great for K through eighth grade.
Right.
Baloney. I'm sorry, but my eighth grader is not reading kindergarten books, and the books that she's reading, a kindergartner can't read, shouldn't read. They're dealing with different things. So yes, can my eighth grader read a picture book? Of course. Is she going to?
But
No.
she'll read it to a child.
Right, but she's not the target. And
Right.
so I think it's one of those things that in trying to be so inclusive of anyone will love it, we actually miss the point of finding our audience. And unless you're marketing, especially time, money, whatever you're investing, unless you're marketing to the right audience, you're kind of wasting your time.
Well, and younger audiences don't want to listen to a 60-second commercial
No.
anymore. I mean, older people don't mind because that's what we had, but that's the other thing. I mean, back in the day when there were very few TV stations, I mean, part of the conversation people would have was, did you see that latest Charmin commercial? And people would just laugh about it because, it's Mr. Charmin squeezing the whatever. Anyway, and there were millions of, characters like that. But we would talk about them because they were actually fun and engaging, and, there weren't that many of them.
Yeah.
And when I did 60-second commercials for a long time, and then all of a sudden the audience changed, and it became apparent that 60 seconds was way too long. You couldn't hold their interest for 60 seconds. So now we made 30-second commercials.
Yeah.
But for me, the writer, I had to create the exact same thing in 30 seconds. So I still had to hook them. I still had to explain something, and then I still had to repeat it at the end. And now you're shrinking. So that takes a little skill. And then 30 seconds got to be a little too long for people. So we were doing 15s and 10s. And it's hard, but we're teaching a class today or tomorrow. Tomorrow, yeah.
On about how to hook.
Yeah, when you say, what's your book about? You can answer it in a sentence or two, because nobody wants to hear a whole story about your book.
By the way, being at conferences, because we are doing a conference this weekend, being at conferences, this is one of the things. Before you market your book, before you go to a conference, really, as soon as you write the darn thing, the biggest mistake that I see is when I ask an author, what's your book about? 20 minutes later, they're still explaining it, and my eyes are glazed over, or I'm interrupting them going, oh, that sounds like a great 5-hour storyline.
Or they'll say something like, well, it's a mystery, but it's really kind of a memoir. But you have to understand that like 20 years ago, this happened, and then this happened, and then it's like, oh, yeah.
Right. Well, and if you're doing that in person, you're probably doing that in your marketing.
Right.
You're not clear. You should, and again, we don't have to tell them the whole storyline. We have to get them interested enough.
If they're interested in a couple of sentences, they're going to ask you for more.
Well, exactly. And then you can go into it, but you also have to be succinct enough to pitch it and then stop. There is power in stopping in silence.
Yes.
My book is a mystery mixed with sci-fi. It's kind of like Fifth Element meets Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
Stop. Let them ask questions. If they want to, they will. And if they don't,
because you've now brought up sci-fi and mystery, and chances are they like one of those two.
Exactly. And then I've given them some examples. Now they're both older examples, so this would not work for a young person.
Right.
But we've painted a picture in their mind. If they want to know more, they're going to ask.
Sure.
But you have to be really snappy and quick. And you have to know this. You don't make this up on the fly, or not well.
You have to read your audience too. I mean, are they glazing over? Stop.
Are they asking to be polite?
Right.
Are they?
Well, it's kind of like, how are you? They really don't want to know too much. Nobody does. They just want to know you're fine.
Hey, exactly. Or, if they'll ask more if they are
How's
ready.
your arthritis? That's a different conversation. But how are you? Nobody wants to.
Yeah. So you should have a very quick, easy pitch.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just lost and you're losing your reader. And that shows me, as someone in books and marketing, if you're doing that, it shows me you don't know your story well enough.
Right.
You don't know your market. you're not reaching the right people, even if you are advertising, because you just don't know it. And that's a big problem. You spend months, years writing a book, and then you don't know what it's about, or you can't tell me what it's about. You are a writer. Take some time, come up with some log lines. And I will say, we're also talking about AI and how AI can be used ethically, and it can be used really well. Put together some log lines for your book and
Yeah.
run them through AI for options. You don't have to
Yeah.
use them exactly as is,
Right.
but in the vein of marketing for Amazon, please create 3 log lines from this. So you are still directing it, but it's like brainstorming. It's like Alan and I sitting in a room and saying, hey, Alan, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
And he comes back and says, oh, but what if it was like this? And
Mhm.
it's a brainstorming function that can work really well for that. So
Yep.
don't be afraid of, that's a great use for AI.
So 2 to 3 sentences max,
Mhm.
short sentences max what's your book about?
Exactly. And you should be able to do that. And you should know it so well that even if you're nervous, even it's just going to be what comes out,
Right.
like,
Practiced it.
exactly. It's like someone asks your name. Well, I'm not saying my name is Barb, like,
Right.
Keri. I can be nervous. It can be a famous person. I will still hopefully know my name. And so that's one of the things you really have to be good at. And yes, narrowing your audience can be hard, because as you're narrowing your audience, sometimes you get it wrong. And this is where you need to either be working with someone who knows the market, who can tell you your audience, or you need to do research. You need to find out, okay, and this is where comps come in. Well, my book is similar to this book. So I'm going to go find out who those readers are. I'm going to go to Goodreads and I'm going to go look at the positive reviews for that comp book. And I'm going to see if the person is an average age. Goodreads has profiles on people where sometimes it'll have their age. You'll be like, every woman who's leaving a review has a cat. And I'm not kidding. Cozy Mysteries. I'm looking at you.
Well, you are a cat lover.
But it's just one of those things where, like, there are ways to do that. And if you don't know how to do that, research, ask someone, get help, pay for help, whatever it takes, because you could be really good at ads, but if you're not good at targeting those ads, like you can run ads, but if you don't know who you're targeting and you're targeting the wrong audience, you're literally lighting money on fire. And if you have money to just light on fire, I'll give you my address. You can send it to me. I'm fine with that.
Well, I've had a long career in advertising, but I never advertised books. I always advertised, soda pop. Sometimes it's foreign countries. It was the Kennedy Center. It was live events and things like that, but never books. And so I really didn't know the best way to do that. So that's why, I got hooked up with these people.
I actually have you and I have at least 2 other clients who work in marketing and PR as a career that I consult with because they didn't work in books. And books they're so different.
Totally different. A cover of a book is so different from an ad. And I've designed millions of ads. I had graphic designers do them, our company. But yeah, I was responsible for them. But, a cover of a book is a different thing. And I think I know what it would be, but I'm wrong. I don't.
Same thing.
And it also changes.
Artists know how to make beautiful art. That doesn't make it a good book cover.
And again, trends change with the books. So
quickly, very quickly. Let's see.
By the way, I know that some of your Free Advice Friday people are coming to the conference.
Yes, we
exciting.
do.
So I hope you introduce yourselves to me.
Yes. I think at least one of them's on a plane right now.
But good.
So we'll get you connected. And so let's see, how do you find podcasters for historical romance novels that are not Regency? So whether it's historical romance, that it's not what I would call a bodice ripper lovingly, or if it's sci-fi, but it's sci-fi fantasy, no matter what it is, the best way to find these podcasts, get your phone out, go to Spotify. You can create a free account, go to Spotify, go to Apple, type in historical fiction podcast. it will pull up podcasts. You have to listen. You have to do some research.
Yeah, it takes work.
It does. It takes work. And honestly,
question.
this is a big part of it because like I have lists of podcasters, but they're all classified as historical fiction. It could be romance, it could be something that's like romance, or it could be something that's like women's fiction, historical fiction. It could be historical fiction focused on wars and things like that. You have to do research, and so listen to them. But also listening to them is good because then when you're pitching, you can say, "I've really been enjoying your podcast. I particularly like the episode when."
Mhm.
This says, I did my research. I listened to you. I will be a good guest for you because I know what you do.
Exactly.
So
That's how you do it. That's exactly how you do it.
And that's how you do it. I wish there was a shortcut. Yes, in some cases, you can go to Chat GPT and say, hey, find me 10 podcasts that do this.
Mhm.
But then you still have to vet them.
It's like a cold call to an agent.
Exactly. You still have to vet them. So my best advice is find the activity when you don't have to listen to a whole podcast episode, 5-10 minutes. Typically, I go straight to the middle.
Right.
Find an activity that you do regularly where you have 5 or 10 minutes and either listen to it on your phone, earbuds, whatever it is. Could be exercising, doing laundry for me. When I do laundry, I'm like, I know it's going to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And that's when I do it. It takes time. It takes consistency. But this is what I keep saying. I wish there was a magic button where you can just do something one time or like, I'm just going to spend a week marketing my book and then like, I'm good.
Mhm.
It's not how marketing works. Effective marketing has to be consistent. I would rather see an author use 10 minutes a day to market themselves than to run all in for a month and then stop because it's not
And
sustainable.
I have to say, I'm guilty of that too. I mean, I just, life takes me in a different turn.
Yes.
And I'm not relying on book sales to, earn a living.
Right.
Although I enjoy selling books a
Of
lot,
course.
but yeah.
Yes, but just that consistency.
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
key.
When I'm consistent, the sales come in.
Yes.
Let's just say that.
Well, in consistency, there's a reason why Amazon ads track sales for 2 weeks. Because what you're doing 2 weeks ago is what's helping you sell now.
Mhm.
And so those are the things we have to consider is oftentimes we're like, well, I marketed today and I didn't sell a book.
I
So
can
it
sell any
wasn't
tonight
worth
or
it.
tomorrow.
Yes.
Right.
I cannot tell you how many times I've spoken at conferences. I've gone to conferences and then I get a call 2 years later going, hey, do you remember me? I was writing a book.
Mhm.
It can be such a long lead. Yeah, Alan, I'm looking
Yeah.
at you.
Yeah.
But I think that's just one of the things that's really important. And yes, Dan is asking when the replay will go up on YouTube. And I'm just gonna
Wow.
pat myself in the back.
Wow.
I've been getting those replays up, so I'm almost up to date. So this YouTube replay will probably go up next week. I'm finally up to date, you guys. I was so behind with the move and everything, but that should go on YouTube. So that'll be great. Let's see, a question here about should I make a video reading my book to children for a children's book author? What do you think, Alan?
Who's gonna see the video? What are you gonna do with the video? I mean, do you have somebody that wants it? I mean, because if they do, then yeah, do it. But
Do you have an audience?
do you have an audience for it?
Exactly. So I would say if you have a YouTube channel, great. If you're actively posting and you have people for that, are you going to use it for an ad? Are you sharing it with schools or libraries? Like, what's the purpose of that video? Because making one piece of content does not a marketing campaign make. And if you don't have a place to show it, what's it doing for you? So,
And then you can put it on your channel, but then you have to get people to your channel. So
exactly. You have to drive the traffic. It is not build it and they will come. I wish it were. But again, is there a YouTube channel that's already marketing children's books by reading?
What would be interesting, I think, is I don't know the person who asked the question, whether you're published, whether you have books for kids that you sell in a book fair or something, or and if you did, it might be fun to have a card or something with a QR code on it that says, I also read my books to children. And, and
A read along.
a read along, yeah. And so you could give that to them and then, they might use it.
I'm going to date myself, but
Okay.
when I was younger, I had a Mickey Mouse that was like 3 foot tall. It was a Mickey Mouse. And Mickey Mouse came with books and tapes. I could put the tape in and it would read the book in the different voices and
Wow.
everything, and Mickey's mouth would move. And I love this thing. And
That's very
God
high
bless
tech, then.
it was. Excuse me, I'm only 20.
Yeah.
But it not only did I love it, my parents loved it, because if you've ever had a child who loves a book and you've read that book 700 times,
Yeah.
I can still quote most of the book that Odin loved when he was a kid. And so I loved it. They loved it. It's good for reading. It's good for literacy to have that. So doing a read along, and I love the idea of when you're doing events, just having it, okay, it's on my YouTube channel, it's a read along. It does not have to be the super sophisticated audiobook or video.
Yeah.
It can literally be you reading. I will say that if you're going to make a video, I would recommend that you focus more on you reading or showing the book. Be very careful when you're recording children. You do have to actually classify that different when you're putting up a video
Right.
with children in it on YouTube. And also you have to kind of have permission to have people's kids on video. So you have to be very
Right.
careful with that. But I love the idea of having a bookmark or something. This doesn't work for Amazon, but you could have a page on the back that says,
Well, right. I
Yeah.
also do this.
Scan this
A
QR
lot of
code.
people will come to your stand and see your books and maybe they're not ready to buy. That maybe they just don't feel like it, or they aren't sure about you, or whatever.
They're traveling.
Or they're traveling, they don't want to carry books. There's a million reasons why they don't buy the first time. But if they see something like that that's free, that they can listen to you and they think, oh, well, that's a nice way to dip your toe into
Exactly.
your stuff.
And I will say also, if you're email list building, do it through BookFunnel. The way you do this, by the way, is you put up a video, you host the video on Google, Dropbox, you have a video on YouTube, listed or unlisted, doesn't really matter. But then you put it in, you create a QR code or a link to that video. You put it in a PDF that says, I'm so glad you're interested. Here's the link. You put it as a PDF, you save that PDF, you upload the PDF to BookFunnel, make a little cover for it. So your QR code that you're sending people to sends them to BookFunnel, or they have to sign up for your email list to get it. You're email collecting and they're getting a free video. You know me, I'm a big fan of email lists. So giving things away, absolutely. And there's a time and place where you just give it, it's just out there.
Yeah.
But also having it where, you can absolutely just, read my book for free or whatever, build your email list so that way you can market to them in the future, because they've got to see your stuff more than 21 times.
Exactly.
You're going to need to email them, one or 50 times.
Right. You need to be very creative to come up with 21 ways for them to see you.
Exactly. Well, I just love this. And we are very excited for the manuscript to marketplace.
Yes.
And the conference.
This is our third one.
I know.
And we have a lot of returning champions, but we also have a lot of new people coming. And I'm really excited about it. Because again, I know you've pitched it before, but it's for writers like your audience, at every single stage. They're thinking about writing, or they've started writing and they're not quite sure if they're doing the right thing for their genre, or they've finished a book and now what do I do? It answers really all those things. And and we have people like Keri, who not only is a keynote speaker, but she's also a resource for people. So, and our conference is small enough that you get the schmooze, and all of the presenters that we bring know that that's part of the job, is they've got to meet the attendees and
You have to be nice.
You have to be nice. Oh, that's going to be a stretch.
Well, and I love this conference in particular because it's so intimate. It's a very friendly atmosphere of connection. But I find that it just conferences in general, seeing people in person and chatting beyond the pitch kind of is very exciting. And I think that you guys do such a great job.
Well, and there's something to be said for these gigantic conferences too. I mean, they bring so many more resources and so many more people and everything, but But this is a little, this is different. This has its other advantages.
Well, you have me. What else?
And
do
you have
need?
you, right?
What else?
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Alan,
Thank you,
for just
Keri.
jumping
Yes.
right in.
Yeah.
Obviously the conference Manuscript to Marketplace is going on now. So
Please post the
Um,
conference info in the chat.
yes, so we will do that. It is going on today and tomorrow, but
And it is
absolutely
not available on Zoom, though.
no, it's not available online. But it is definitely one of those things that keep
Let
it
us
on your
know if you
radar.
want to come to the next one. We'll put you on our mailing list.
Absolutely. Because it's always such a good time. I've never been here.
And now that Keri lives so much closer.
I do. It was a shorter drive, which I appreciated.
Right.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I put the information in the chat. If you don't get it, if you have more questions about the conference or you want to connect with Alan, just let me know. You can email me. You guys know that. Next week, we actually have another special guest. We have Mike is going to be coming in. Mike is a audiobook narrator who does a lot of audiobook narration through ACX. He's going to be answering all of our questions about how to create an audiobook, how to work with narrators, how to piss off narrators, and how you pay narrators on ACX, all sorts of good things that he's going to jump in with us. And that's Mike Steele. He'll be on next week. So be sure to join us then, 10 a.m. Eastern. And until then, we'll see you later.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.